to start this conversation talking about some of the latest thing that's been going on. I think there's obviously the whole saga that's been dominating the news cycle, right, around OpenAI and everything there, right? So I'm intentionally not going to start there.
Okay.
So, I think it's something that's kind of been on my mind lately because I work as a product manager in automotive tech for one of the big OEMs. Has been the Cybertruck release was interesting. I'm
Yeah.
keen. This is such a divisive topic in terms of this because I'm really keen to hear if you're in the camp of you're a believer and love it, like the crazy design philosophy they've taken with this, or if you're like me, where like eye roll, this is ridiculous. Where
Yeah.
do you stand?
I'm happy that there is a different design,
Okay.
but that is not the design that I would have.
The Microsoft Paint, like people
Yeah.
were doing the meme of, yeah.
Exactly. Some people are saying that it looks way better in person than it does in the photos and videos.
Interesting.
But I don't know. Obviously, I haven't seen one. Right now, I have a couple of videos pulled up looking at it. I think it's even better now than when they were showing the earlier pre-production stuff. But I mean, it's cool. I like the Elon Musk philosophy of just building something because it seems cool to him, and then it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I do, I have some concerns about it. But I want to hear more of your take before. This episode is sponsored by City Innovations. City Innovations is a venture studio located in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but they serve people all over the world. If you've got an idea that you want to bring to market and you're not sure if you're building the right thing or if you are selling to the right people, consider talking to City Innovations. They'll help you validate that idea and make sure you're doing the right thing. Find City Innovations at cityinnovations.com or search City Innovations anywhere on socials.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's funny because I think the point you make around Elon just like wanting something and making it a reality and then making people want it because he wants it is like such a unique trend we see at all of his companies where it's like, I'm going to do something that's so ridiculously out there, it might just be cool, right? And so I think what I really find interesting is that, I think actually what's kind of gotten me more interested than even like the really divisive design of the thing is some technologies that they're building into it. Like we're going to start seeing more vehicles like steer by wire is a really foreign concept. It's like there is no mechanical linkage anymore and like what you can do with the driving dynamics with that, as well as their software experience, right? I mean, that's something that I think all vehicle OEMs are chasing right now, which is like, how do you build just an incredibly nice, fluid, streamlined UX, inside the vehicle. So what I do appreciate about the design though is that, I think it was actually also Elon Musk who said that, the actual looks and aesthetics of the vehicle are going to matter less and it's going to be more about that user experience inside the vehicle, which is, I'm curious to get your take too, if like vehicles are going to kind of go the way of the smartphone, right? Which is like, they're all just generic on the outside, but it's really that customer experience on the inside and that connected experience that makes them differentiated.
Well, that's what they always talked about with the skateboard or surfboard design. What do they call it? The skateboard design?
Yeah,
where
it's skateboard. Yeah.
Where just you have all of the important mechanicals and electronics all in just this one flat bed, and then you just drop any kind of body on top of it.
Right.
That I did think that exactly that. Like we would establish a form factor that works pretty well, and then there just be these little touches that people like that bring them joy, and that's why they want to use it. But I mean, I agree with. I guess I agree with that statement that it's going to be about your experience with it, but it's probably not going to be a great truck though. Anyone buying it is just going to buy it for the cool factor, not because they have to get stuff done.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that the contractor in Ohio isn't going to be rocking a Cybertruck seriously? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't think so. I do not think they're going to be the first ones to jump on board. Then even the price point was off, right? I think that's my biggest issue here is that he just did not deliver on what he said he was going to do. I think it was supposed to be 500 miles of range and it was going to be $70,000 and that'd be fantastic. But instead it's 300 miles and then it's $100,000.
Yeah, like so the top line trim I think is that kind of $100,000 price point, which It's so interesting because I think we've seen this across the board with just consumer electronics in general is that base price is just rising and rising and rising, right? So it's like, I think the thing that the world needs least right now is yet another premium electric vehicle, right? I mean, it's something where it makes total sense from a strategic standpoint for the businesses to be like, hey, we're going to build a really sweet kind of what we call like a halo product, which is kind of the top of the line. It's, just bad to the bone across the board. That's easy, right? And I think the reason why I was a little bit disappointed with that too is because I'm like, oh, like this was going to be an option that was going to be more accessible, right? And it was going to excite a lot of people about the prospect of potentially more sustainable transportation, right? So I think, when I saw that come out where the base price I think is $60,000 or $70,000, I'm like, well, there goes that value proposition, right? And I think I was also a little bit disappointed because I thought that was also kind of why the form factor was the way it was, right? Because there wasn't any sort of complex stamping or anything like that involved with the design of the exterior. It's just it's flat panels, right? So that I agree was a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, so we'll see. I'd love to drive one. I think the marketing is hilarious. Did you see the Cybertruck pulling a Porsche 911 and then beating
racing a 911? Yeah,
that was so good.
That's something that I think Tesla does really well. Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah. Did you see this, Evan?
Yeah, let's let this play for a second. This is great.
So you have the Cybertruck racing against the Porsche 911.
Famous sports car, right?
And the Cybertruck is going to win. But guess what?
It's hauling a 911 and it beat a 911 in a quarter-mile drag race. That's just, that kind of thing is cool, I think.
It's impressive. It's a feat of engineering, it seems like.
So here's the flip side of that though too, right? So thinking, putting on my product manager hat, my day job hat, it's like, this is kind of a funny trend we see too, especially in automotive, where will a customer ever need to do that? Absolutely not, right? And so, but I think the problem is because now like we see these sort of amazing feats of engineering, and let's be clear, it's an amazing feat of engineering to be able to do that. Now we see all the other vehicle OEMs say, oh, now we need to match that, right? We need to be better. We need to match that benchmark. And as a product manager, I always have to ask myself, like, why though? Like, are we really fulfilling some sort of, first principle need of the customer by doing this, right? So I think it's amazing, and it's an amazing marketing tactic that they've used just through sheer performance. But again, I always have to ask myself, okay, is this actually solving a real customer need?
Yeah. What do you think in the automotive space has really solved a customer need that's been new in the last few years? Outside of, we now have electric vehicles that can be purchased and they're usable, but
sure.
What do you think inside the car or safety or performance has really met a customer's need that didn't exist, let's say 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think one of the best examples that just immediately comes to mind, and this has been talked about quite a bit, is what Ford did with the F-150 Lightning and the introduction of dry lockable storage in a pickup truck, right? That was like a really interesting innovation that felt very purposeful, and it actually opened up an entirely new demographic to the prospect of not just buying an EV, but buying a truck too, which is Ford's specialty, right? And so that was like a really great example where, we had some enabling technology, and there was a clear need that was being met by these customers who were like, previously maybe, oh yeah, I would love to buy a truck, but I can't fit my carry-on in it anywhere unless it's in the bed, right? And then I can't use all of the interior storage space. So I think that was a great example of a real customer need being met, which also kind of enabled this whole new market for people who now consider these new pickup trucks, right? There might be first-time pickup truck owners. Combine that with the handling dynamics of those new EV trucks, and there you go. It's like a great driving experience. Doesn't drive like a big clunky truck, right? The other thing too, I would say is I think there's been a few good examples, but this is something I think hasn't been focused on enough is also like really intelligent design in kind of more of like I don't know if this is the correct term, but like kind of a reductive way. Like what can we potentially take out of a vehicle to drive that price down, but still enable an amazing customer experience, right? Really looking at really critically at what we had in the past and saying, okay, what was actually necessary here, right? Do we need this little gadget or whiz, like little widget or thing, in the vehicle? And if the answer is no, like take it out, right? And so I think there's been a few vehicles that have done that really well lately. But I think we still need like a really critical focus on that to make sure, going back to the point we made around affordable products,
Right.
Let's build affordable products, but let's not make it feel like we're taking value away from the customer. Let's just be more intelligent about the way that we design these things. So I would say those two things really come to mind first and foremost.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But do you want to go over to your other topic that was on your mind with the AGI? You want to talk about that?
Oh yeah. So I mean, there's transitioning from I think talking about it is really exciting, and it's actually a good segue because inevitably when we think of companies like Tesla and other vehicle OEMs transitioning to the use of all things artificial intelligence, right? I mean, it's surprising how much these companies are actually leveraging those technologies that consumers may not even be aware of, right? But I think similarly to the use of like some sort of machine learning in vehicles is also like something I think hasn't been talked a lot about with like the introduction of all these generative AI technologies, a lot of open AI's models and things like that, is the integration of those models with more physical systems, like robotic systems. There was a video recently. I'm a total Boston Dynamics fanboy because I'm just a giant nerd for that kind of stuff, as you know, Bryce.
Yep.
And they dropped a video where they integrated some of OpenAI's models into their Spot robots, right? And it was just funny to see how much personality, these little mechanical systems could produce with, these off-the-shelf generative AI models. Yeah. And it's funny because I look at those and I'm like, we all know that's not real intelligence, right? Yeah. It's predicting the next token. It's using a lot of algorithms for like image recognition and processing and these sorts of things. But I'm also keen to get your kind of take on what the world might look like if we take these very capable physical systems, combine really state-of-the-art, perception technologies with, all the great sensor fusion these systems can do, radar, LiDAR, vision, these sorts of things, and combining that with something like generative AI to make these systems seem more intelligent, to maybe expedite that world we all imagine when we were younger, where like robots seem sentient, right? Yeah. So, I mean, have you thought much about that, or what's your take on that? I'm curious.
A little bit. Right now, I'm looking at the Boston Dynamics ChatGPT infused robot tour guide.
Yeah.
And they put a top hat on it or some bowler hat on it, and I think that's the peak of technology right there. That's all we ever needed was a robot tour guide.
We're done. We made it, right?
So we've achieved it. Yeah. The implementation of OpenAI and ChatGPT in this case isn't that exciting for me because it's just it's conversational. But I'm not really at this point. I'm not really looking to have conversations with a robot. So I don't care for that as much. Now I am excited about as more money goes into these larger and larger models. Then there's also money going into smaller and smaller models, which will then enable AI in different forms on edge and on these different robotic devices, on physical devices. So I am excited about that when it then starts scaling back down and is being used for more things than just having conversation with robots. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of the same thing too, where I've always thought, again, no offense to the marketing team at Boston Dynamics, but all the dancing videos and things too, I find those a little cringy. It was fun at first, right? Where it's like, wow, a very capable system that can do very amazing things, right? But now it's kind of like, okay, we're going to do another dancing video, you guys? So like, I really hope, to your point too, we don't go that way with the integration of these like generative AI models in these systems where it's just like, it stays kind of kitschy and like a novelty. And I think what, the part of that one demonstration that they did that I think caught me as the most interesting is not so much, the ability to converse with, these robots or anything. It's actually when they, prompted, this robot to show them its like parents. and that sort of inference that generative AI model can provide to this physical system, it took them to the previous spot iterations in the building and said, look, here are my parents, right?
Ooh.
And it's like that's kind of amazing, right? Even though it's using a lot of these different kind of essentially, predicting the next token, understanding of the layout, it's perception technology, these sorts of things. But like that's a little bit uncanny to me, right? It's like was not expecting that level of I guess like it seems like insight,
Yeah.
right? So that's what I'm actually more interested to see what evolves in that space, which seems to be a bit more intelligent than just, can you converse like with an Alexa, right?
Right. Well, yeah, the current round of AI is designed to be pleasing to humans. And so with that interaction of take me to your parents, it was doing what it thought the human counterpart would want to see, right?
Right.
So I think that's why it gets so uncanny. It's not acting as you would expect this robot to act. It's acting like a robot trying to be a human, and it gets weird. I think that's also why Boston Dynamics does the silly marketing, because if you just look at the robot on its own doing things, you're like, this is nightmare fuel. I mean, this is gonna haunt me if I see this robotic animal walking around. So then you make a dance, and you're like, oh, it's my friend.
Oh, it's so friendly, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, which is actually another really interesting reason why, it's funny because they took that angle to kind of market these products and make them seem more friendly and approachable, right? Whereas, I read recently too that the reason why ChatGPT is called ChatGPT and not something else is because they very clearly wanted to make it sound robotic, right? And so they're like, we're not attempting to make this, feel like you're talking to another human. You have to understand this is an AI, right? Yeah. So when those lines start to blur a little bit and becomes a little bit more hard to discern, okay, is it thinking? Is it not, right? Which I know these systems aren't thinking, quote unquote, thinking at this stage, but it's still, really interesting to see those unexpected outcomes,
Have you seen, have you seen the large language models injected into video games lately, like into Skyrim? Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
So what they're doing is they're taking the non-playable characters, the NPCs, and they're hooking them up to AI, so that then they can have just these generative conversations with
open-ended.
Yeah. And then, so what do all players do? Then, of course, they're trying to ask these existential questions to the,
of course.
Like, do you feel anything? Are you alive? What,
right.
But it's creating some really interesting interactions. I'm excited about that for the open world aspect of just being able to have your totally unique experience in a game, and it's not scripted, and just seeing where it goes.
Right. And that's actually, a really interesting concept too, when we kind of look at yet another topic, right? That's really been interesting is that mingling of kind of the digital and physical worlds, right? Yeah. And, that's a great example of like, man, you can see very clearly when you start to be able to have these open-ended, non-scripted conversations with NPCs. It's like, it's very clearly going to be one of those things where you can see a lot of people getting sucked into that really easily. It's like, wow, this is the world I want to live in, because like you said, it's like, there's no, there's no kind of bounds to what like these things can really talk about. Right. And that it's all kind of running off these canned models and everything, but still, it like when you kind of forget about that for a second and you just kind of buy into the experience, it's really interesting, I think, how kind of lost in that you can get. And so like you can imagine, when we start having these virtual reality experiences that I know like Meta is still pumping money into, right? Which, by the way, I'm still amazed it hasn't gotten farther than it has up to this point. This is me as like not a scientist in this area or engineer or anything, but it's like, man, this is the best we can do right now. It's like, I'm kind of amazed by that. So I feel like there's so much more potential.
Yeah, I think it'll get there. I think this is an example of you can't buy your way into a market being ready like that. It's just going to take time.
Yeah.
And then you'll get mass adoption, because there are people who are getting lost in the world of VR and AR right now, and they're loving it. And I that's on my list for the months ahead, is to spend more time with VR and really understanding it and bringing it into my day-to-day work too. Yeah. I do like the idea of the, multiple virtual monitors all in one space. I think that's really cool. Like the idea that you could get, you could buy a $400 device, but it could emulate like you have 10 monitors, right?
Right.
You don't have to buy all this physical hardware. You can pick it up, take it with you.
Right.
I think it's going to level the playing field for a lot of people in that regard. So I do think, I think we'll get there. I think everyone knocks Meta for just these like low fidelity characters that they create, and they can't figure out how to do legs and all that stuff, right?
Right.
So I think they get knocked, but I think the market will get there in time.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of also interesting to see why, we're now at the stage. I think, like most people, a good litmus test for when a market is ready to reach mass adoption is when Apple gets involved, right? And so, like, that is always like an interesting indicator to me where they finally said, yeah, we're officially entering this kind of mixed reality space, right? And it's interesting, they also took, the mixed reality approach rather than like a full VR approach, which I think, for their purposes, like the use cases of their new device is much more in line with what I would use, right? As a user of like virtual reality or mixed reality, where it's like you said, it's like, hey, now my office, instead of this kind of ugly, like big monitors sitting on this unwieldy desk with my computers everywhere, and now it's just going to be a keyboard, a mouse, and a little headset, right? That's sort of an approach. So like now, like what do you need to have like an office anymore? There's all these really cool implications to the introduction of those sorts of technologies. And I think, of course, like most people, the Vision Pro is what I'm most excited for in that space. Because again, I think taking the opposite view from you on like virtual reality, like I don't really have a desire to like, I feel like honestly, maybe it's because I'm motion sick easily or something, but it's like until it can be really immersive and interesting, I'm definitely in kind of like that late adopter group for that sort of technology.
Okay.
So
did you see that Apple, when they announced their Vision Pro headset and they had their June launch, this is, in June, everyone was talking about AI. Every single presentation from every big tech player had AI. This is what we're doing for AI. They did a 2-hour launch presentation, didn't say AI, artificial intelligence once. They said machine learning instead. So they are, they are going to establish their own definitions, play by their own rules. So are you going to buy the headset then, Vision Pro?
Hey, if it's available, I would love to. I mean, I think, I have a lot of interest for my own, quote unquote day job for like the implications of that technology. But I would definitely consider investing in one of those because, I think this is also kind of the power of the brand that Apple has created. In my mind, right, I know that I'm not investing in some kind of underbaked, early beta of something. There might be issues, right? But I think based on all indications from people who have had access to these devices is that it does feel fully baked and it feels very fluid and intuitive, and like the eye tracking tech is like next level, and like the natural, gesture recognition, all these sorts of things lead me to be like, okay, I feel more confident in investing in something like this.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw Mark Zuckerberg's statement on the Vision Pro versus their headsets, the Quest headsets, but the Zuckerberg said that I think Facebook Meta is planning on creating 10 times as many units in the next year, or 100 times as many units as the Vision Pro. So Zuckerberg's saying like, we are serving a different audience. We're thinking about this totally differently. If we need to put out 10 million units versus just your 1 million units, it's very different. So, but I think Evan actually has opinions on the Vision Pro, so I want to hear from him. Are you a fanboy or no? I feel like there was something you didn't like about it.
Of the Vision Pro?
Yeah.
I saw the original launch and then didn't see much more of it after, if there were like updates or new videos about it.
Yeah.
But the eye display.
The eye display.
I mean, I know that's what everybody has talked about.
Yeah.
About it looking goofy. And yeah, I agree. I think it does look goofy.
Yeah.
But I mean,
look how nice that is, though.
No, I don't think I'll get it, but I think that they're doing a really good job with it. Like, I don't know much. I honestly don't know much about it, but it looks really cool. I think I laughed out loud though when I saw the original. Like, oh, people, it'll look normal when you're talking to somebody because they can see your eyes. Like, I would rather not.
That's actually a really good point you make. Is I'm a firm believer that you don't need to make things
Yeah,
human
right there.
looking.
Like I don't need you don't need
Exactly.
to do that. It's not necessary.
It is like I definitely could never take someone seriously if I was having an actual conversation. They were just looking at me through this kind of like offset display where like it looks like their face is weirdly kind of like protruding from their actual face.
And this situation in particular, because the other person doesn't have a headset on.
Take it off.
Yeah.
It's like just take it off.
Why would you do that?
And
Yeah,
like,
I think they were trying to say like it's so natural that you can have, your
Right.
glasses on when other people don't. But
right.
I mean, you got this massive headset on. It's not gonna look natural no matter what.
So maybe I'm a little bit jaded because we live here in the Midwest, right? But I can't help but feel kind of like the Cybertruck thing too, right? Is that like I'm going to see a bunch of Silicon Valley bros hanging out, having real conversations through this headset with each other, and I'm just like, I can't take you seriously, right? Like, and so I think like in this too, like I'm really actually curious, what sort of studies that Apple may have run to lead them to this design, because like
Yeah.
to me, what made you do this instead of some little clearly digital indication of where you're looking, right? Like whatever it might be, cutesy little digital eyes or like whatever, right? I mean, because like when you try to make things so realistic, I know I might sound like a naysayer here, but like you so clearly get into that uncanny valley space, right? Where it's like, ugh, like get away from me, right? So I'm legitimately curious though, like what led them to this, which is clearly more complex too. Like this is a very intricate implementation they've done here. So
yeah, I would rather see just like a flip up option, like just let me just flip up the lens so then I can see through and make eye contact.
I'm getting like vibes, like what are those like 90s glasses you can like flip up? That's kind of what I'm getting from that right now. We could work on something.
I may or may not have had those. I was very excited about them. Like I had the clip-on ones too.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I think it's a good looking product. I think some people are. I think you're dead on though. Some people are going to buy it just because it's Apple, and there's going to be the bros who flock to it. But I don't know.
Are you going to flock to it, Bryce?
I
feel like you're always like a pretty quick adopter of new tech like this.
am.
But
You
like
are.
my question, because I figure you were probably going to get this, but like, what do you see yourself like doing? Like, what are you getting it strictly for the tech to see how it works and if it does things well, or do you have specific ideas of what you would use it for? Because I don't know what I would use it for.
Yeah, the only idea that I know I want to use it for, besides like games, it would be to do this augmented workspace and have multiple monitors up and be able to sit wherever I want and work however I want. Take my whole setup with me.
Right.
I don't know how well that's going to work because it's still being powered by a not so powerful processor and GPU and all that. So it just might not work well for me. But the real reason why I want to adopt these early is because I want to figure out future patterns and experiences before everyone else does.
Right.
Like I want to use it for a week straight and then know like, oh, here's where it fell short. Here's why people can't use it for a week straight. And here's how I think I could help with it. Right. Or like people who are using it for a week straight, here's what they want to do next with it because it's in every part of their life.
Yeah.
There's videos of, I forget the guy's name, but he wears a Quest headset and he just goes through his whole life with it. He goes to the gym and he works out because it has a pass-through mode.
Seen that. Yeah.
And so he does it and he can live life. People will say, yo, man, what are you doing? What's going on? You got something on your face. But I don't think it's that crazy to imagine a world where, a future where people do have headsets on. If you can easily see through and it's just everything's augmented instead of virtual reality, building a fake world around you.
Right.
I think people would do it. I could see people just walking around outside and they have their headset on. They got their videos playing over here while they're still rocking.
And so I think that's an actually really interesting point because that's, again, what jumps to my mind next when I see these sorts of devices is how long until it becomes just generally accepted that this is a normal thing to just wear around, right? Because like the closest analog I have to that is, during the COVID pandemic, right? At first, you see these people walk around in like all of their like protective gear, sometimes way over the top. We've all seen the memes of people that have taken their own creative spin on PPE, right? But even people just like wearing masks, you're kind of like, look, you're so afraid to be out in public, you're wearing a mask. And then very quickly, of course, that was fueled by a lot of fear too, right? So that probably accelerated the process. But very quickly, unlike any other time of my life in the United States, I know that this is more common in other countries, but just seeing people with, a mask on and gloves or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, that's totally normal, So things like this too, where it's like, at first it's gonna be like, oh, look at that idiot, right? But then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, there's a lot of benefits to me wearing this too. And just seeing how quickly that progresses.
I think that's an amazing point. That's a great parallel because in the beginning of all the pandemic concern, going to the grocery store, I saw one person wearing a mask. I was like, oh, okay, they're odd. And then I see a few people, and then I see a lot of people. And then in my head, I was like, okay, as soon as I see more people than not wearing one, like, okay, then I guess I got to do it. And so I think it's the same thing with this, like exactly what you're saying. If there's just one person wearing it around, I don't care. But then you see a bunch of people wearing it and you're like, okay, it must be a thing. I'll give it a try.
Yeah. And like, it's that innate, desire for us as human beings to not want to be in that left out minority of people that, aren't doing something that everyone else is doing. But it's interesting too, because I think this sort of technology for like a mixed reality application is actually will be my hypothesis is that it's going to be much more effective than like Humane AI's PIN implementation, where, that's a whole nother thing that, got some notoriety recently was, and I know you said you wanted it, Bryce, so I'm bringing this up intentionally because I want to hear your thoughts on it too. But that seems like a much harder thing to adopt because with a wearable headset, things are overlaid exactly where you're already looking, right? Yeah. With something like this pin, it's cool, and I love the idea of it, right? That it's non-intrusive, it's kind of just on you. You don't have to hold a phone. You can talk to it naturally, but you have to hold out your hand to see any sort of visual representation of your own data, right? Yep. Or your information. It's like that just seems so clunky to me,
right? Yeah. I don't think that's going to work very well, but I guess you have to get hands-on with it and see what the laser does. I think I was excited to see that form factor and see that type of interaction. And I like the idea of any surface becoming a screen, but I don't feel like the laser screen is the way to do it. There's got to be some other way. I don't know. Obviously with augmented reality, then you can also have the same thing because it just anchors this virtual window to whatever thing you want. So we talked about this a little bit, and Evan and I got into it too on a podcast. But Evan is totally against the pin. I'm a fanboy of it. I'm supporting it. I was going to place a pre-order as soon as it launched. Yeah, but I didn't. I held back.
Getting cold feet about the whole thing.
I'm going to be honest. I was influenced by all the comments on their launch video. Just everyone tearing it apart. I kind of backed down. It's like, oh, maybe the masses are right on this one. Yeah. So let me bring up this thread so you can.
I'm curious to see what people are saying about this.
Yeah. So let me try to minimize this too. So you got this. Like the very first response to it was $700 for something my phone does already, right? My phone doesn't project onto my hand, but have I ever wished that it did? No. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. So I think so many people look at it that way. It's like, well, my phone already does it. I think that's the exact line from you, Evan.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, like, Evan, to get your take too on like, okay, I mean, do you think there's something here where it's like, I guess I'm trying to. I said, there we go. Yes, I want 24/7 streaming my life to T-Mobile. Yes, I mean, but I do try to like understand what they were trying to accomplish with this, right? Because even in the name, right? It's humane, like humane. Is it Humane AI or is Humane?
This is the Humane AI pin.
That's right. I mean, okay, as put on your standard just consumer hats, right? Like if you saw this, would you rank the value proposition of non-intrusive computational capabilities is like high on your wish list compared to like your phone, which I think their premise is that that's more intrusive. You have to look at it. It's constantly distracting you from your day-to-day life. How highly do you rank that ability to kind of use those phone features without being sucked into a screen on your phone?
That's a good question. I think there's definitely value to that idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's also really hard. Like you have to retrain your way of living. I feel like, especially with this AI pin, is like now have to do, and it's not a bad thing, but it's like I think it's another way that discourages people from getting it is that I now have to do all these things out loud.
Yeah,
and I have to train myself to talk to this pin.
It's a great point,
and I think that's hard. I think that's a really hard to get the average consumer to buy into when I can quickly just, I know it's quickly just go to your phone and check these kind of things, but there's also the whole other element of, you know, retraining the way you live, I feel like, with this, especially with this pin.
You know what's similar to that out loud aspect is watching videos on your phone out loud. Like the millennials, you'll see some will listen to videos out loud, most won't. But then Gen Z, like no problem, right? Like they're just, the feed will play, and so I do think it's like generational divides, and people will have issues with that. Unfortunately, the only ones who are going to pay for this are going to be older, like millennials and Gen X, and they're so. Yeah, it is weird to have to talk to the thing to get the answers. Other people who've talked to me about this have said, like, why don't I just hang my Apple Watch from a necklace, right? Oh. Like, it seems...
That's interesting.
It seems like it's where the Apple Watch should go. Just give it some different mounts, and it's a peripheral. Like, keep your phone. Use your phone for when you need it. But then you have this other device for a few things. Like, put a better camera on your Apple Watch. And do the replaceable battery tech. I really like that. I was hoping that you would be excited about that too. Did you see that, John, with the battery packs that are replaceable?
Yeah. And that's, so it's funny too, because like, I think Evan, you bring up a really good point. I can't remember who created this law of new technology adoption or transitioning from one software product to another, is that I think the general rule of thumb, right, is that it has to be 9 times better or 9 times easier to actually, for the average consumer to make a switch, right? And I might be misstating that actual number, but it's a pretty high bar, right? And it's kind of the same reason why I think a lot of late adopters were kind of hating on Tesla too, is because they completely reimagined the interior controls of your vehicle, right? So it's like, you know, hey, instead of shifting out of park, now the car will just do it by itself. And whoa, wait a second, right? And then once you do it, you know, it's like, okay, like I totally get it.
You're right. You quoted it exactly. So human beings evaluate new things relative to the status quo. We are risk averse. We exaggerate the cost of a loss in our minds. So if a new product is to succeed, it better be 9 times better than the current solution.
Yeah. So that's something to think about too, right? As we think about, because again, we are all the type of people who are constantly looking to create that next thing, like we talked about in our last conversation. This benchmark is high. That is a very high bar.
That's interesting
to pass, right? And so I think that also is a good litmus test for us as we think about the next things that we want to build, where it's like, okay, is this really providing that much more value or that much easier to use than the existing thing? And I think it's going to be interesting to see how people overcome that barrier if they do want to adopt these new technologies like the pin or the headset or whatever it might be.
That's awesome. I want to look at that lens. Next time we talk, I kind of want to do an exercise where we take existing things out there and think about what it would take to be 9 times better in order for someone to adopt it, right?
Oh,
what would your phone have to be? What's a 9 times better version of your phone in order for you to replace a phone? It's crazy to think that way.
It is. And I think like what'll be fun about that conversation next is that takes some like real out of the box thinking though too. And it's hard because like you think about it, you know, a lot of these companies have the best human factor designers in the world and the best product managers and engineers and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, right, like I think a lot of people let that get to them and say, well, I'm not even going to try. Right. So it'll be fun to go through that thought exercise with maybe a product or two next time we talk.
Cool. Let's do it. All right. We got to get out of here. John, thanks for coming on. Evan, thanks for all you do. We'll do this again very soon.
Good to be here. Thanks.
All right.
Cue the
Outro song. Dun, dun, dun. Outro song.